What's going on, guys? I'm Abby Martin, and this is Breaking the Set. So, remember how the NSA was spying on other countries and world leaders? Turns out the people in those countries don't take too kindly to having their privacy invaded. And now one country is standing up to Uncle Peeping Tom. Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff just postponed a trip to D.C. in protest of U.S. surveillance. And now the government is working on ways to circumvent the NSA altogether. One such plan would require internet service providers to set up local data storage centers protected under local privacy laws. And Brazil's postal service is taking it a step further by developing an encrypted email service. So, here's to hoping other countries take a cue from Brazil and stand up once and for all to America's global spying machine. I don't know about you, but when I think about Monsanto, the first thing that comes to mind is food safety enemy number one. After all, I'm talking about a company that went from producing cancerous gems like DDT, PCBs, and Agent Orange to genetically re-engineering a staggering portion of the food wheat here in the U.S. Just to give you a sense of how monopolistic this industry has become, consider this. 40% of the world's GM crops are grown in the U.S., where Monsanto alone controls 80% of the corn and 93% of the soy. Corn and soy make up the base of almost every processed food item in this country. Interestingly enough, America is unique in its production and consumption of GMOs. Every other industrialized country has either completely banned or at the very least labeled GM products. Why? Because these countries have recognized the risks associated with them. Most recently, a French scientist concluded that GM corn leads to tumors in rats. So, with this knowledge, why is the U.S. government giving Monsanto a blessing of deregulation? And not just a blessing to sell their products, but to sell them with a guarantee that consumers have no idea what they're actually eating. So the answer is simple. The government has no shame when it comes to the revolving door policy between private industry and regulation. It all started when George Bush Sr. deemed GM crops as substantially equivalent to non-GM crops. After that declaration was made, the floodgates opened and saturated the market with untested food products. This policy continues today because of the dozens of U.S. government employees that have a personal stake in ensuring that Monsanto meets its bottom line. Take, for example, former Democratic Congressman Toby Moffett. This Connecticut lawmaker worked in Congress for 8 years before he became a lobbyist for Monsanto. Or, think that's a conflict of interest? How about the career history of Margaret Miller? She originally worked as a researcher on bovine growth hormone, or BGH, for Monsanto, and now she publishes research papers on BGH for the FDA. And get this, her research was backed by Michael Taylor, the current Deputy Commissioner for Policy at the FDA. This guy epitomizes the revolving door. First, Taylor was a lawyer for Monsanto. Then he joined the FDA's Deputy Commissioner for Foods. Then he went back to Monsanto and became its Vice President for Public Policy. Yeah, I'm sure his FDA position didn't help open that door. But don't worry, he's now back in the FDA in the same cushy position as he was before, rubber stamping pro-Monsanto legislation. And he's not alone. Take Marcia Hale and Josh King, who left their jobs at the White House for lobbying positions at Monsanto. Meanwhile, Virginia Weldon and Lydia Watford ditched their positions at the chemical giant for 2 job openings at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. I mean, really? You think that there was an underground tunnel between the White House and Monsanto? Even the kings and queens in the highest court of the land have ties to the mega corporation. Clarence Thomas used to be an attorney for the ag giant, and now he sits as Justice of the Supreme Court. But you know, if there's one person you can thank for it all, it's Mr. Roger Beachy. Beachy's research for Monsanto led to the world's first genetically modified crop. So, knowing all of this, is it any wonder why Congress snuck in an extension to the Monsanto Protection Act in the latest spending bill? And this has been your revolving door alert of congressional sellouts, as always, sponsored by Monsanto. We already know Nestle's making a killing looting Canadian water. In fact, every year the company extracts 265 million liters of water from the ground in Hope, British Columbia, and sells it back to Canadian residents for $1.19. But Nestle is getting away with it because the Canadian province has zero regulations on accessing its water. This means that Nestle can keep pillaging the land with absolutely no consequences and without making a dent in its $12 billion annual profit margin. Understandably, the 6,000 BC residents who share the local water source with this giant multinational are concerned with the free-for-all. And one organization called the Water Wealth Project is fighting back. Earlier, I spoke to its campaign director, Sheila Muxlow, and first asked her, how exactly did Nestle come to extract water from the ground in Hope completely for free? Here's her response.
Essentially, it's as simply as because they are allowed to. Right now, the water laws in BC are set up so mega corporations like Nestle are able to come in, take groundwater, not have to report it to anybody. But I mean, I guess more specifically with Nestle, they bought what was a family-owned bottled water company that was set up in Hope, BC in the 90s. And essentially Nestle bought it in 2000, where then they changed the operation from what was a 9 to 5, quite a small scale operation, to now a 24/7 round-the-clock operation where they are extracting groundwater.
I just find it hard to believe that it really is like the wild, wild west out there, that there's absolutely no regulation at all from these giant multinationals to extract water from the ground. I mean, can any other corporation, big and small, do the exact same thing there? And what about residents?
Yeah, exact same thing. Residents, corporations alike. It's a glaring failure in the water law of this province at this time, where there's a complete absence of groundwater regulation. And so, yeah, it's that simple. You go in, you drill a well, and you are able to access that groundwater for free. You don't have to do any sort of mandatory reporting or reveal how much water you're extracting. There's no oversight in terms of the long-term impacts that it might have to be draining on groundwater in large amounts. It's really a glaring failure of water law in this province, and something that I think is we're one of the last jurisdictions in North America to have not come into the 21st century and to see any sort of regulation on our groundwater.
Unbelievable. Nestle's defended its actions on its website by claiming that they're the largest employer in the area, providing jobs for 75 Hope residents. What's your response to that?
It is true. It's a small community up there. Folks are quite reliant on the industry for jobs. That said, if there were mechanisms in place where local residents could be involved in making decisions about what type of industries could function in their communities and access their groundwater, there's a potential that other industries or organizations could sprout up. And I think the other piece to it is that although Nestle definitely is offering these jobs, there's other I think elements that are necessary for a company like Nestle to undertake before they could call themselves a good corporate citizen. A major one is understanding the territory that they're working on, and it's unceded Stalo territory, which means that there aren't treaties in place that really allow for the natural resources to be extracted at this rate. And so for Nestle to come in, if they were to claim to be a good corporate citizen, they should have prioritized engaging with the Chihuahua First Nation, the Union Bar First Nation, whose territory they're on, to make sure that their operation is not violating their rights and their needs.
That said, I just wanted to repeat 75 jobs. I mean, that's how they're justifying everything they're doing there, is providing 75 jobs. Really a drop in the bucket when you look at the bigger picture here. You mentioned the local community here. How do you think Nestle's footprint is adversely impacting the local population in Hope?
There's also issues with the extraction of the water, how it does impact on other residents who are tapping into that aquifer for their own, residential use. In terms of, the water pressure that's available to them. Again, though, this is something that we don't have, the adequate science or monitoring underway to pinpoint if this is a consequence of Nestle's operation or not, because of the overarching failure of the provincial government to really prioritize regulation of of groundwater use.
Right. As an activist, I just wanted to ask you a personal question. Do you think water is a human right? And how does it personally make you feel that Peter Brabeck, the former CEO, Nestle chairman, said that thinking of water in this way is an extreme view?
bizarre and quite delusional, really. But and yes, you know, the idea that water is not a human right is yeah, is the unreasonable radical perspective. I mean, given the fact that our bodies are what, more than 75% made of water, you know, that really we could go barely hours, maybe days, you know, without water to really survive. When people start talking about water, that water not as a human right, you know, that it is something that could essentially be withheld from people, particularly based on an ability to pay framework. So that's a major problem.
Yeah, I mean, it must be nice to be Peter Brabeck and never have to worry about having water to survive. I can't say the same for millions and millions, if not billions, of people around the world. Let's talk about solutions here. Right now, are there any signs that the government's planning to take action and start regulating Nestle?
There are, yeah. I mean, that said, we've seen these signs before, so it's definitely something where there needs to be some withstanding pressure. But it has been, it's, you know, about, I mean, nearly 6-7 years that we've seen such strong remarks coming from our environment minister, stating the need to reform the Water Act, you know, acknowledging that this is a problem, that there's no regulation of groundwater withdrawals. That said, we'll see where it goes. I mean, what we would like to see at the Water Wealth Project is that, you know, those reforms take place in a good way that acknowledges Aboriginal rights and title, that allows for more local control over these decisions, you know, so that Nestle can't just come in and apply for a license, you know, that's going to impact a community like Hope, but have that decision made in a place like Victoria or Ottawa. But essentially, right now, we're working with legislation that was crafted in 1909, you know, so it's more than a century old. Yeah.
Wow.
And yeah, and it just hasn't been a priority for this government to respond to it. So, or to reform it and respond to the needs of people nowadays.
Well, I think you just mentioned an important point, which is that it's not just about getting them to pay for the extraction of water. It's really about shifting over the control to local bodies and really reclaiming this foodstuff, as Peter Brabeck would call it. And Sheila, how can we make that happen? How can people in the United States, all around the world, really help stop Nestle from taking over the planet's water supply? We have about 30 seconds.
Jeez. I would say, one, you know, of course, don't buy the stuff. Two, you know, keep maintaining visibility in the opposition to them, right? Like, that's it. We can't be bullied or intimidated or think that it's not worth it to fight back and make sure that you know, that we're making these clear demands that water needs to be protected as a human right, that companies like Nestle aren't able to access it and take it and throw it in bottles and sell it back to us. You know, make sure that that doesn't become a norm. You know, push back on that normal.
Absolutely.
Hold on to what is what's right.
Thank you so much. Sheila Muxlow, Executive Director of the Water Wealth Project. Really appreciate everything you're doing.
Hey, no problem.
Should Walmart be required to pay a living wage to its workers here in the district? That question has been causing conflict here in D.C., and we'll find out why next with Nikki Lewis. Washington, D.C. is one of the last major cities in the U.S. without a Walmart. When the largest retailer in the world announced the opening of 6 stores in the district, the D.C. Council passed a living wage bill. This bill would have required Walmart to pay its employees a minimum wage of $12.50 per hour. While D.C. Mayor Vincent Gray called the bill a jobs killer and vetoed that measure. And just yesterday, the D.C. Council fell just 2 votes short of overriding that veto, paving the way for Walmart to begin its takeover of the nation's capital. So to discuss how the lack of a living wage bill will affect D.C.'s working class and why Walmart should change its slogan to everyday low wages, I'm joined by Nikki Lewis, Executive Director of the D.C. Jobs with Justice. Thank you so much for coming on, Nikki.
Thank you for having me.
So what now? You know, it's vetoed. The mayor vetoes it. They voted to not override the veto. Are there any other legal avenues that we can take to make sure that Walmart does not set up shop here in the district?
Well, I don't think it's that we don't want them to set up shop. I personally, as a resident, I think that 6 is too many in a 20-mile radius city, but we do want economic development in our city, but we want it so that it benefits the residents, the people who are unemployed, as well as the underemployed residents who are really struggling. So while the bill didn't pass, it wouldn't just have been about Walmart. It would have also affected other billion-dollar corporations here in the district already, but since they're building 6, you know, it's the big to-do. But at this point now, I think we're going to keep advocating. We're going to keep telling our city council that DC residents deserve better. And in fact, this whole multi-year, you know, push, this movement in the city to hold Walmart accountable has led to several council members introducing a citywide minimum wage hike, which they had never introduced before. So we have to figure out what the best steps are to move forward at this point.
I guess my next question is why do you think it is that several, you know, supposedly progressive members of the DC City Council did not vote to override that veto? Because really, that was their chance.
Yeah, it really was their chance. Councilmember Che said that she just didn't think it was a good piece of legislation. I guess the way that it was written, she had some technical problems with it. Tommy Wells, who we generally think is very progressive, you know, he supports paid sick days, but he didn't vote for this because he said that number one, our returning citizen populations need access to low-wage jobs, and also that people in his ward, specifically in Ward 6, need access to cheap, affordable goods at a walking distance. So the thing that was disappointing about those reasons, though, is that, again, we all want economic development in our city, but we just want it at a price that the workers that work there can also benefit.
Well, of course, that's always the argument. Okay, our economic development, it's a jobs killer, but really, I mean, let's talk realistically about the living wage in DC, which is astronomically high. I mean, according to the MIT living wage calculator, $13.68 an hour to live in the district, Nikki. So I just don't understand this disconnect here. Yes, of course we want jobs. Yes, of course we want economic growth, but really, it's expensive. It's an expensive city.
Right. It's really expensive. I know. I pay rent here, and I've been up and down as a low-wage worker myself, trying to struggle and make it here. The thing that's just so disappointing is that $13.25 or $12.50, something in the $12 to $15 range, is doable for billion-dollar corporations like Walmart. And in fact, when you pay your workers a living wage, it builds loyalty in them. They want to sell the brand more. They take pride in their job. But, you know, when they don't, when you see how big your company is growing, but how you're not profiting from it, you know, you don't have pride in your job, and dissent starts to happen amongst employees. You know, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Walmart workers across the country who are starting to organize themselves, called our Walmart Associates, because they're tired of being underemployed, given part-time hours, not given access to any kind of medical benefits or job security or a living wage. And so we see that trend across the country, and that's why we're fighting so hard to make sure that companies that can pay do.
It is beautiful to see workers standing up, not only there, but in the fast food industry as well. And I wanted to kind of debunk these myths that we hear a lot. You know, it'll drive up the cost of consumer goods at Walmart if they do pay a living wage. I just wanted to debunk that really quickly. Walmart has consistently claimed it would drive up consumer costs, but according to a study by UC Berkeley, if Walmart paid its workers $12 an hour, it would cost the average shopper almost 50 cents per trip.
Per trip, yeah.
And I think that a lot of people would agree that that's worth it.
Absolutely.
So why, what is their argument when they're faced with these facts? I guess, do they just kind of not address them?
It's really the same argument that has existed since the 1930s, since the 1870s, that, anytime you give your workers a little bit more, it's going to kill jobs, it's going to kill jobs. And so in this situation, before the jobs even started, or before Walmart had a chance to make profits, they were like, well, we're just going to not build 3 of the 6 stores here, because so they're killing the jobs before they even get here. There's plenty of residents that need jobs here. And in fact, Mayor Gray just said that there's 1,000 new people moving into the district every month. Like, there's people here that want to shop.
And talk about the health care we're also subsidizing for Walmart workers.
Yeah, health care and food stamps as well. I can't say the exact statistics what it is, but I just read somewhere on Twitter earlier today that some percentage of Walmart employees actually are on public benefits.
I think what I just read is that one Walmart superstore, we taxpayers pay almost $1 million, $900,000 to subsidize. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, that's just an astounding figure. So really, you have to look at, the cost-benefit analysis here. Talk about this race-to-the-bottom approach to business in general. I mean, why is that so destructive?
It's destructive because, like, Walmart has been such a profitable model in our economy that other businesses are looking and saying, well, how can I do what they're doing as well? So it becomes kind of like the standard, and over the last several years, you see this proliferation of low-wage jobs in the retail industry as well as the restaurant industry, and I think that we can do better because they're so profitable. There's no...
And I want to jump in here, we've about 30 seconds left, but what can people do to help make sure that Walmart really holds itself accountable and pays workers a living wage?
I think that every time they go and shop at a Walmart, they should tell the manager, like, I want to be a patron here, but I want to know that the workers are treated good, and I'll stop shopping here until I know that you improve the work quality for your workers.
And do you have any websites or organizations that people can get involved in or go to find out more?
Sure. They can check out ourwalmart.org, as well as dcjobswithjustice.org, and I think ufcw.org as well. All have information.
Thank you so much. Nikki Lewis, Executive Director with DC Jobs for Justice.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I take no prisoners, you call it aggressive, but all I see is lies coming out in your message. What can you say?
Guys, over the years, we've seen what the true nature of so-called free trade agreements have been, the effects of which have created a fleeting job market for the American middle class and exploitative working conditions for foreign workers. But over the last few years, a new kind of trade deal has been in the works. It's called the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or the TPP, and it's an unprecedented series of negotiations not led by world leaders, but by multinational corporations. Yes, big banks, global telecom companies, pharmaceuticals, and fossil fuel giants are all standing to benefit immensely from the passing of this deal. Only to add to this troubling scenario is that negotiations are being conducted in total secrecy. Not only are the American people left in the dark, but members of Congress are too. To make matters worse, as public attention is finally starting to shine a light in the shady dealings, it seems that now these same multinational groups are looking for a way to fast-track the TPP. Negotiators have launched a campaign to force U.S. lawmakers into an up or down vote without having a chance to even review the content of this international agreement. We cannot let this happen. Fast-tracking the TPP, this conniving trade deal, goes against basic democratic principles. This Friday, September 20th, lead TPP negotiators will be right here in Washington for another round of secret meetings. So if you're in the area, come join the rally outside the office of the U.S. Trade Representative. And also flood your congressmen and senators with phone calls, emails, and tell them no. Vote no on the TPP, fast track, and the TPP in general. This is a call to action, guys. Time to bring the TPP out of the shadows and into the light.